We're joined now by Danny Morrison. He's the executive director of the Charlotte Sports Foundation. Big weekend coming up in the Queen City, Danny, as you have the biggest opener of the weekend in college football, the Duke's Mayo Classic. Two of your alma maters, North Carolina and South Carolina, going at it right there at Bank of America Stadium. ABC national television audience. It's a great time to be a college football fan, but especially if you're going to be in Charlotte this weekend.
Well, we couldn't be more excited. We've got ESPN Game Day here that'll be in Romere Bearden Park that kicks off the morning at 9 o'clock, and they'll be there till noon. And we've got a great fan fest prior to the game right around the stadium. And, of course, as you mentioned, primetime ABC 7:30. It speaks a lot about just Charlotte, and people come to Charlotte. They love being in the uptown. You park your car, you walk to the restaurants, you walk to the stadium, and it's just a fun atmosphere. When we had Clemson, Georgia in here a couple of years ago, it was the largest hotel night ever in Charlotte.
Wow.
And so a lot of excitement around that game, same kind of excitement around North Carolina, South Carolina. Both programs have high expectations going into the year, and of course got two of the better quarterbacks in America as well.
Spencer Rattler for the Gamecocks, and obviously a hometown guy there from the Queen City in Drake, May. We're going to talk more about the Duke's Mayo Classic a little bit later, but there is so much to unpack with a guy with your background, and we'd be remiss not to hit on as many of these things as possible. So let's take a look at your career, because I'm jealous. I mean, you've gotten a chance to do it all. You were born in Winston-Salem, grew up in Burlington, proud Williams High School guy, basketball standout. You go on to Wofford, and you get it done there. But just in that little transition there, you made so many contacts as a student at Wofford that it really did lay the groundwork for a lot of really fascinating things later on in your life. Tell us about the relationships that you made, not only with the school president, who was your Western Civ teacher that would later hire you as the AD at 31. And then you were also at the home of a guy that had a lot of Hardee's restaurants that later hired you for a pretty important position in the National Football League.
Well, first of all, my teammates would not like you be using the word standout because they know better. So basketball standout probably wouldn't be correct. But I love my time playing basketball. I was blessed to be on some really good teams at Williams High School. And then at Wofford, we just had such a great experience for those 4 years. And like you mentioned, you just never know in life when somebody's you're going to cross paths with somebody. And my Western Civ teacher, who only taught one class at Wofford for both the spring semester and the fall semester, I had him for both. And he was the dean of the college, and he only taught the one class. I had him. He was named president the very next year at Wofford. So he was named president at age 33, took over at 34. The president at Wofford at the time had gone to SMU as the president. He ended up later being the president/chancellor at the University of North Carolina, Paul Harden. But Joe Lassane was great. He did hire me some 13, 14 years later, 1985. And then at Thanksgiving of my freshman year, there was this 35-year-old iconic business person named Jerry Richardson. And he and his wife, I still marvel at this. How can you think about doing this at 35? We were the only kids on campus during the Thanksgiving holidays. They wanted us to have a family experience. And so I met him at that time. Wasn't like, we got to know each other closely while I was a student at Wofford, but I did know of him, and he would come to several games. But he was working all the time. So it wasn't like he was at all of our games. And then had the chance to work with him when I came back as AD at Wofford. He was on the board at Wofford. So those were pretty important people in my life that I met freshman year in college. And I try to reinforce all of that with the students. I teach, as you know, a couple of classes at the University of South Carolina now. And I really try to say that you just never know when somebody is going to impact your life. And those two had a huge impact on mine.
Absolutely. We're talking with Danny Morrison. He's the executive director of the Charlotte Sports Foundation Big Dukes Mayo Classic coming up Saturday night in Charlotte, North Carolina and South Carolina, ABC National Television, ESPN Game Day. But Coach, you've been a coach. Let's talk about that. You probably don't get called coach too much too often these days, but you coached at Williams High School. You coached in college as well. How did your time on the sidelines impacting the lives of the athletes and the students that you were around, because you impact people who didn't play for you as well? How did that put a stamp on your administrative philosophy and how you would go on to be a commissioner, a director of athletics, and then an NFL team president?
Well, I love my time coaching. I actually thought when I went back to the alma mater, Williams High School, I was JV coach my first year. And then a lot of times you got to be lucky. I was in the right place, right time. The head coach, I was assistant on the varsity, head JV coach at the time. The head coach decided to be just AD, full-time AD, and I became the head coach. I was 22 years old, not much older than the players, but I really thought I'd be there for 40 years, coach the father, son, grandson, and I could have been happy doing that. That's a wonderful life. Nobody makes more of an impact on high school students than coaches, and that would have been fun. So I could have been doing that, been happy, but then I had some opportunities, and I've said this so many times over the years that I'm one of the lucky ones. I had great coaches all the way through. I had great bosses all the way through. So when I hear these horror stories about certain relationships between a coach and a player, or a boss and some in the workplace, I never had to experience that. I had really outstanding people that I worked with over the years. And you hope, one of the things you hope you impart in young people is things that really aren't that complicated. Be a good person, work hard, get along with people, don't be afraid to take risks, have integrity. A lot of these things, we try to make them way too much, too complicated. And I think the older I've gotten in life, the things come back so much to fundamentals and basics. Be a good person. We try to hire talent. There's no substitute for talent that are good people, that get along, connect dots, have integrity. You do all those things, and generally speaking, you'll end up in a pretty good place. And I had bosses over the years that always encouraged you to take risk. And you'll take risk as long as you don't get your knees cut out from under you if something doesn't work. But the bosses I had always wanted you to try new things, keep learning. If something didn't work, they didn't want you to do stupid things. But if something didn't work, so be it. We'll just shift gears, pivot, and try to do something else.
I was 39 years old when I got the call to be a director of athletics at Towson University in the Colonial Athletic Association. I've been a broadcaster. I've worked as a senior associate in the Power Six at that point. I thought I had all the answers, and it was very quick that I learned that I really didn't know anything. You're 31 when you get that job. So we've talked about what laid your foundation in terms of your philosophy, but what would 31-year-old Danny Morrison have in comparison to where you are right now? And what advice would you have given him about the current state of college athletics? Because it has to feel like that was a million years ago. And it wasn't that long ago, really. But this is a very challenging landscape right now. And the skill set to be able to manage that, whether you're a conference commissioner, which you've been, whether you're a director of athletics, which you've been, or whether you've been a head coach, which you've been, has got to be exponentially just crazy to have to manage on a daily basis.
Well, college athletics has been kind of crazy for a long, long time. people forget the Southern Conference, which was formed in 1921, had eventually had like 23 schools in the Southern Conference. So conferences have been expanding and contracting for a long, long time. So 23 schools in the Southern Conference, and then in 1932, the SEC, the core group of eight, I think it was eight, broke away, formed the SEC, and then you had that same kind of thing happened in 1953 when the ACC broke away from the SoCon. So there's been a lot of movement in college athletics for forever. There's the Carnegie Report on Sports in America back from 1929. If you read that, you shake your head and you say, wow, you think some of these issues would have been solved over almost 100 years, but a lot of the same issues. But it's still at the heart of the matter. College athletics is great. I love the young people. We have a tendency to just focus on the high-profile sports, but there's so many people that are getting a great benefit from being in college athletics, and so I really admire what the students are. They are getting really good education, and they're getting a course in how to compete by being involved in intercollegiate athletics. The higher profile sports and the so-called high revenue producing sports, they are different today. The media rights are different. You've got the influx of incredible amount of money because of that coming into the system. So, what we're seeing is as those things change, the whole structure changes, and the players involved in those high revenue producing sports, I think will continue to benefit financially from that.
Our mutual friend Eric Hyman, the former director of athletics at the University of South Carolina, he's been around for a long time. He said something pretty poignant a few years ago. He said, anybody who wants to be a Power 5 director of athletics in today's day and age, and this was a few years ago, that they have brain damage. Now, I don't want to go down that road, and he was obviously just trying to make a point. But can you ever imagine what these guys are dealing with right now? And maybe a better question is, where do you see it going? I mean, you have a unique perspective. So do you see this realignment a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, 5 years down the road, maybe going back to what you mentioned, that big Southern Conference of the 1920s, maybe a combination of the powers of the South, geographically aligned and philosophically aligned to being there not only for big dollars, but also for an incredible experience for these athletes? Because it seems like sometimes that gets lost in the process.
Well, first of all, Eric Hyman was an outstanding athletic director. I had the good fortune to follow him at TCU when he left TCU to go to University of South Carolina. But it was great to step into a situation that was already well run, and we could just try to take it from there and keep getting better. But I have great respect for Eric and all the many great jobs he did in his career. So I'm positive about college athletics. I think there's still we have a tendency to forget about all the good things and the impact it's making on young people. It's a different era now. Social media has created so much 24/7, the recruiting aspect of that. But when it's all said and done, it's still, you get back to teams, teamwork, the specialness of going for a great goal and being the best that you can be at something. So I'm not negative at all on college athletics. I think there's, again, a lot of good that goes there. There's a lot of ancillary noise, if you will, and it's a different job now for today's AD in the social media space and all of the other extraneous things that come into play. But when you talk with the ADs, they still are most excited about the time that they get to spend with young people and helping young people grow and develop.
And they'll be growing and developing this Saturday night in Charlotte, the Dukes Mayo Classic. We're talking with Danny Morrison, Executive Director of the Charlotte Sports Foundation. And Danny, I grew up just a little bit away from here in Newton Conover. I'm a Red Devil, okay? And Charlotte was our entertainment center when I was growing up. I remember going, you probably have been to some of these events, the Shrine Bowl that used to be in American Legion Memorial Stadium, and the North-South doubleheader, NC State, Carolina, along with Furman and the Citadel. For a lot of times, they had some other, I think St. Joseph's and another school had worked its way in there at some point. But, the North-South doubleheader and the Shrine Bowl were it. And now, with the group you lead now, the Charlotte Sports Foundation, you had the Dukes Mayo Classic, you had the Ally Tip-Off, you have the Jumpman Classic, you have the Dukes Mayo Bowl, and then you also have the Mech Mile, which I am jazzed up about, coming up in May of 2024. I mean, you and your talented staff are really putting together really the mecca of sports in the Southeast. I mean, really challenging Atlanta, which for many years was considered to be the sports capital of the South. You have all these events and the ACC office now in the Queen City.
Well, we're excited about all of that, and you hit the nail on the head. We have an incredibly talented staff, very young staff, and they meet all the criteria that we talked about earlier. They're bright, they're wonderful people, they get along great. We challenge them all the time. Let's see some other things that we could do to diversify our portfolio. And Miller Yoho in our office came up with the Mech Mile. We were talking after the NCAA women's basketball tournament, and our staff said, wonder if we could get Iowa here to play in Charlotte. And so we started working on that. It came together really nicely with two Final Four teams, not only with Caitlin Clark from Iowa, but you've got Virginia Tech and two-time ACC Player of the Year, and basically their whole team coming back off a Final Four run. That's going to be a special night in Charlotte on November the 9th. And we're so blessed in Charlotte. The secret sauce here is how well everybody works together. Nobody cares who gets the credit. The CRVA, the city, the county, Bank of America Stadium, the Spectrum Center, everybody just works so well together. Charlotte is booming, as you know, 130 millennials moving into Charlotte every single day. The Uptown is vibrant, fun place. Park your car like we talked about earlier. Enjoy the city, and you can walk to all the venues right there in Charlotte. So there's been great planning in Charlotte. The city fathers for a long, long time have understood the importance of community and having a special place for people to come and work and play and have fun. And they've done a remarkable job.
Danny, you also, in addition to all the things we talked about, have been a tennis coach in your background. And there are rumblings right now that Charlotte's about to steal from the other Queen City, Cincinnati, one of what's called the fifth major in professional tennis. And we're in the U.S. Open realm right now. Everybody's excited about what's going up down in Queens with the USTA. But it sounds like soon Charlotte could be home to professional tennis, and again, that fifth major, the Western and Southern Open. Is that something that you have a pretty good feel for, and what's your inside knowledge? I know the foundation might not be directly involved in that, but as you said, the Charlotte sportscape is widespread. So will professional tennis in this massive complex, this state-of-the-art complex, be built in the Queen City of Charlotte, North Carolina?
Well, you have a wonderful tournament in Cincinnati. They've done a great job there for 100 years. And it's one of the best 9 tournaments in the world. And they get a fabulous field every year. And we'd love to have that tournament in Charlotte. we think it would be an amazing event for Charlotte, and also just for the River District. It's near the airport, world-class airport. So it's basically a blank canvas. So you'd have the opportunity to build a facility to be one of the best in the world from the very start. But Cincinnati's done a great job with it over the years. So we hope we're able to attract it to Charlotte. There's been a lot of work by a lot of different people to try to make that happen. And we believe it'd be incredibly successful in Charlotte. All one has to do is to look at the success of the major events in Charlotte. Right. A couple of good examples: the President's Cup, Johnny Harris and Quail Hollow, and the job that their team did in putting on the President's Cup, highest revenue ever for a President's Cup. And I think you could say the same thing about the PGA. So Charlotte would deliver, and that would be a fun couple of weeks to have the best tennis players in the world here. And what's been fun to watch about Charlotte, when there's a big event, Charlotte steps up, and the corporate community is fabulous. And again, the President's Cup exceeded all records that, and again, it speaks to Charlotte and the good work that's done in this community.
Danny Morrison, the executive director of the Charlotte Sports Foundation, excited about this big football game. Let's get some information to the fans now as they're coming into the game on Saturday. Where do they park? What can they bring and not bring into the stadium? And if they don't have tickets, if they haven't planned ahead, will there still be tickets available, and how do they go about getting those?
Well, first of all, for information, dukesmayoclassic.com. So all the information will be there. Same kind of regulations as far as what you can bring into the stadium that you would have for an NFL game. Parking very similar as well. So a lot of parking around the stadium. It's just not, when you're in an uptown environment, you still have parking. It's just not one big parking lot like you would have in a suburban stadium. But it's a lot of, there's plenty of places to park. It's a great stadium. I think it's one of the best open-air stadiums in America. Once you get inside the stadium, it's beautiful, beautiful outside as well. And they've done a great job of maintaining it and keeping it current. And there are even going to be some more things that will be done. So it should be a great game. Ticketmaster has tickets for sale, and I would encourage people to go there. We think we'll be over 60. Well, we're confident we'll be over 60,000 for the game, which will be a great crowd, and it should be what you would expect out of a rivalry game.
Absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun. Had a great time at the ACC Football Championship last December. Fantastic crowd there as Clemson wins another championship. And now you have their arch rival, the Gamecocks, against their ACC rival, the Tar Heels. Clemson, not in the game. They're playing Monday night at Duke, but it's North Carolina and South Carolina Saturday night in the Dukes Mayo Classic. Danny Morrison, executive director of the Charlotte Sports Foundation, thanks a lot for joining us here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
Well, thank you for having me. And we couldn't have two better coaches than Mac Brown and Shane Beamer. And they have so many similar characteristics, different age, but they're just wonderful people to work with. They've done amazing jobs with programs, and we're excited about how both teams are coming in on an ascending note with two Heisman Trophy candidates for quarterback.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, before we let you go, you know, our number one sponsor here on the North Carolina Sports Network is the North Carolina Port Council. So we've got to ask you. Now, you're born in Winston-Salem, really close to Lexington. You grew up in Burlington, again, really close to Greensboro. And North Carolina barbecue, it's a hot topic, Danny. Western North Carolina or Eastern North Carolina. Now, don't forget, I know this too. In addition to being the VP at Wofford, after you became the AD, you ascended to the VP level. You are also in charge of food service, so you are truly uniquely qualified to answer this food question. What's better, Western North Carolina or Eastern North Carolina barbecue?
Well, first of all, I love it all, and I can name a lot of the places. When I was at Elon, of course, we played Atlantic Christian at the time. It was Barton back then. I mean, it's Barton now. But, I mean, we'd go to Parker's Barbecue there in Wilson. So I like the Eastern North Carolina barbecue, but I do have a favorite. My favorite is Lexington Barbecue right there on the old 85. Mr. Monk and all of his crew, it's fabulous. And I used to take, when I was recruiting at Elon, I would always take recruits there if we were coming through there for some reason. So I don't think you can get better than the barbecue in North Carolina and South Carolina, quite frankly. But my favorite would be Lexington. Yeah, absolutely.
I love their hush puppies. I mean, they are out of this world. And you're right. As long as that's barbecue, I think Danny and Mike will be really excited. But thank you for your time. Look forward to a great event Saturday in Charlotte and throughout the rest of the 23-24 sports year. Sounds like everything's happening big time in the Queen City. And as always, we appreciate your time.
Well, great. Thanks for having me. I should have added that all the great barbecue places also use Duke's Mayo.